start recording. All right. So yes, welcome to this session, which is prerequisites to a research project. And our wonderful research and development team member Shreya is going to take this session. And I hope you have um, all your doubts about whatever comes to your mind when you think of a research project solved today. Also wanted to say that Shreya will be taking questions at the end of the session, and she'll ask you in case there is a space for questions in between. And yes, I hope you have a lovely session today, Shreya. Over to you.
Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing great. I will start by sharing my presentation, but before that, let me introduce myself. I am Shreya Sharma. I have been a part of IWP and the research and development team for more than a year now. And as part of the team, I have undertaken multiple research projects. If some of you attended the first session on Monday, you would have already gotten like a glimpse into the kind of research that we do and my involvement with the research. Currently, I'm pursuing Masters in Psychology, specifically MSc in Counseling Psychology from Christ University, Bangalore. I'm someone who is very passionate about social and community psychology. I'm someone who believes in understanding mental health from a socialist, feminist, and intersectional perspective. So yeah, that's about me. I'm going to share my screen now. And before I begin, just some like general guidelines for the session. As Prerna already mentioned, I will be taking questions in the end, unless if there is something that is like is an urgent question and you want to like stop me in the middle, please put that in the chat and Prerna can like stop me in the middle and ask that question. But preferably like I'll be taking questions in the end. Yesterday's session was a more theoretical session, but today's session, as you can see in this, I hope my screen is visible. Today's session is about prerequisites to a research project. The session today is going to be very interactive, practically oriented and application based. I would therefore like request all of you to like, I hope you've all joined like from your laptops, as it's going to be very participation oriented. Even if like not, keep like a pen and paper with you at all times during the session. As you might also know, I shared a Google which most of you took out time to respond and reply to, which was great. I wanted to like thank all of you for it. Based on your responses, I have planned and structured this session accordingly. As you can see, this session has been divided into three broad sections. Firstly, we are going to be talking about research topic. How do you select an effective research topic? How do you finalize on a particular research question? What is the process that goes behind it, etc.? Formulate a research proposal. A research proposal is a formal structured document. How do you draft a research proposal? And lastly, I'll also be touching upon literature review. How do you read? How do you do academic reading? How do you find research articles? Because even though it might look very easy, but especially for beginner researchers, this can be a very daunting procedure. So how do you write a literature review? How do you select articles? How do you do referencing? All of that, we'll be touching upon that as well. I hope my screen is visible to everyone. At any point I am not audible or my network goes haywire, Prerna, I would appreciate if you could just like stop me and just let me know. Because
Shreya, could you just press full screen out?
Yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah, I hope everyone. I would also encourage if more people could switch on their videos. It would be lovely to see more faces. Hi, Shivangu. You can see you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as you can see on this screen, research is a very comprehensive involves multiple steps. But the reason why today's session becomes very important is because selecting an effective research topic which encapsulates your interest, which conveys to other people what you want to study, how you're going to study it, what your target population is going to be, is the first step of that like comprehensive research process. So that is why today's session is so important, because it will help you understand the first step, which acts as the foundation of this research process. And based on the Google form that I sent out and the responses that I received, a lot of you shared how like you find it difficult to select a research topic, how you face. So I really hope that today's session will help you answer some of those questions. Moving ahead, I want you all to do an activity. As I already mentioned that this session is going to be interactive. Yeah, on the screen, as you can see, the prompt is mentioned here. This prompt was also shared with all of you. I hope that the prompt. Yeah, I am going to send you a link. It's linked to a page. I'm going to put it in the chat box. I want you all to like open this link and wait. Yeah, you can all go to this link, and in this link type out what are your interest areas, like what is like a topic that you're interested in, what is something that you're passionate about, something that you're interested in. Yeah, I can see people are typing. Okay, I see one response. The reason instead of asking you all to put it in the chat box, I've asked you all to like paste your responses here is because I want all these responses to be collected at one place so that we can all come back to it at the end of the session and see if we've been able to move from this broad area of interest to a specific research topic. Has this session allowed you to do that? Have you like learned that? Okay. Impact of the pandemic on mental health of school. That's a great interest area. That is already like a research topic. My areas of interest are music, creative arts. Okay. Have you thought about how do you want to link music, creative arts to psychology? That could be something that you can think about. Psychosocial impact on healthcare workers, daily wages post-COVID. I see that a lot of you are really interested and passionate about researching, on aspects that are related to the pandemic, to COVID. That's great, which actually shows that you people are like aware, you've been reading. Body studies. Very interesting. Relationship between weight stigma and eating disorders. So you've already identified two variables here. You've already identified the cause and effect relationship that you want to like establish and study, which is great. Parenting styles, male mental health, okay, family environment. These are some great responses. Thank you so much for participating and putting in your responses. I can see, yeah, organizational research psychology. Yeah, organizational behavior is like a large subsection of psychology, and there is a lot of scope of like research there, which is great. Positive psychology, yes, definitely. Role of media. So thank you everyone for sharing in your responses. Uh, Moving ahead, coming to the first section of this presentation, firstly, I would want you all to keep a note of all these research interest areas. You can also look at other people's, you might have seen what other people have also shared. Keep a note of these interest areas that, you're passionate about, you want to conduct research in. Moving on, how do you decide on a research topic? How do you narrow down now from this broad interest area that you have? For example, some people talked about role of media, some people talked about their interest in music. Now, all of these are broad interest areas, right? You cannot conduct research on role of media. You will have to narrow down. You will have to narrow it down. You will have to identify certain variables. You will have to, maybe establish some cause and effect relationship. You'll have to uh, add more variables to that, right? Now, most beginner researchers find it very hard to locate a specific topic among their interest area. But the first step is to start with something that you're interested in. Now, does anyone want to share why is it important, whenever you decide to do research, why is it so important to focus on something that you're interested in? Why does your interest area becomes important? You can post in the chat. I will take a look. Okay, Ashna, I see your hand. You want to unmute and speak?
I think it's very important to pick a topic that strikes our interest, because research is a really long process, and we need to maintain our interest throughout it. Otherwise, we can't leave a project in the middle. We can't leave a research paper, or we just get up one day and we say, oh, I'm not interested in this anymore. The effort goes to waste. So it's better that we stick to something that we like.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Ashna. That is actually correct. In the Google form that I shared, a lot of there were some responses. Like some people spoke about how they would want other people to tell them how to pick a research topic, like other people to give them a research topic. But that is not an appropriate approach towards research. You need to think about areas that you're interested in. If I'm assuming everyone is a psychology student, or everyone here is interested in something to do with psychology or mental health or research in that area, think about things that interest you. Think about things under psychology that are of interest to you, something that intrigues you. Now, a lot of people might ask that there are multiple subject areas even within psychology that are of interest to them, right? Someone might be interested in social psychology, but they also might be interested in studying role of media, for example, or parenting styles, as someone mentioned. So how do you even find a topic? How do you even find it, that one research interest area, even that one broad area? So ask yourself multiple questions. Ask yourself why you're interested in it, right? Why is it something that interests you? Do extensive reading on it. By reading, now I also don't mean that you straight up need to move to journal articles and you need to start reading research papers, but at least equip yourself with certain contemporary debates in those in your interest areas. For example, a lot of people spoke about COVID-19, right? So which gives me that idea. A lot of people are interested in doing research which has something or the other related to the pandemic. So read more about the pandemic. Read what kind of research has already been done related to the pandemic, how mental health and pandemic have been related, right? So read more about it. Read newspaper articles, do a Google search, and maybe read some articles, read some blogs that you find, right? Equip yourself with knowledge about those interest areas, right? Which will help you further understand that what is that one interest area that you're more leaning towards, that you're more interested in. Another tip would be to also pick an interest area, something that personally aligns with your values in any way. For example, if I identify as a queer woman, researching about LGBTQ community or any research which talks about mental health and LGBTQ community becomes of personal interest to me. You know, it's an area that I'm personally very attached to, I'm interested in. Therefore, doing research in that area is something that, you know, I would really like. And as Ashna also mentioned, that interest is important because as we saw in a previous slide, research is a very long and comprehensive process, right? Which will involve a lot of reading. So you'll have to read a lot, you'll have to do literature review, you'll have to read a lot of research articles. And if you pick a topic that you're not interested in, then you won't really be able to see that research project through till the end, right? So that's why interest becomes very important. And a lot of people have already mentioned about some of their research interest areas, right? But now interest area is also a very broad area. It's not narrow enough to be done research on, right? A lot of people spoke about parenting styles. A lot of people spoke about pandemic, their interest in music. But you cannot do research on that. You cannot do research on music. Or for example, if I'm interested in social psychology, I can't do research on social psychology because it's a very, very broad topic which can have multiple subsections and areas underneath it. So now, from a broad area of interest, once you've identified that, you need to move towards a narrowed down topic underneath that interest area. For example, if you're interested in, say, for example, environmental issues, you're someone who's very environmentally passionate, you're really interested in environmental issues, and you want to do research in that interest area, but it's not a topic. So now you need to find topics underneath that interest area. So now underneath environmental issues, firstly start by making a list of topics, right? Underneath environmental issues, what could be certain topics that are of interest to you? For example, sustainable development, climate change, right? Those could be some possible topics underneath that broad interest area, right? So do you see how climate change becomes a topic underneath a broad area, which was environment or environmental issues? Does anyone have any questions? Does this like make sense to you? Do you see some like problems with it? Do you want me to like go ahead? Fine. So yeah, you can start by making a list of topics, and then you could also like read more about those topics, and you could like then pick one topic that you think is of most interest to you. For example, climate change, right? You want to like study about climate change and the impact of climate change, right? Say for example, you did extensive literature review. We'll come to literature review, so like don't worry about that. You read a lot of articles, and you found out that there is a lot of research on climate change that has been done. And recently, because of like global warming and everything, you're noticing there has been certain pattern changes. For example, here we see like how you can study about the effect of climate change on lifespan of migratory birds. So based on certain reading that you did, you found out that effect of climate change is something that you want to do research on, right? So what you did essentially, you moved from a broad interest area, which was environmental issues, to a narrowed down topic, which was effect of climate change. Now, even effect of climate change is not a research question per se, because it does not answer all questions. It does not answer what exactly do you want to study, what your target population is, and how you're going to study it. For example, like effect of climate change does not answer that, like effect of climate change, but on who? Effect of climate change, but like how do you want to study it? what is the context of your research, etc. So therefore, you need to move from a topic to a formulated and structured research question. For example, if your topic was climate change or effect of climate change, you need to identify uh, certain variables that between which you want to establish a cause and effect relationship, so that you can arrive at a well formulated, so that you can, yeah, Rohit.
Ma'am, like, I'm sorry, I wanted to ask that variable implies, like, is it a word or object? Like, what is it exactly, variable? And like, I was confused regarding that.
Yeah. So variable is essentially anything that varies. It can be like a phenomenon. For example, in this example, the effect of climate change on lifespan of migratory birds. Climate change is your independent variable, and lifespan of migratory birds is your dependent variable, because we want to study the effect climate change has on lifespan of migratory birds. So,
Understood, ma'am.
yeah, okay. So, like if your
Yeah,
research
Ashna
topic,
is also raising her hand, and there is a comment in the by Yukti which says that can research topics be repeated in any or certain circumstances?
repeated in what sense?
Yukti, do you want to maybe clarify what your question was? Yukti, are you there? Let's just wait for Yukti to clarify. We can go with Ashna. Shreya, she's raising her hand. Also,
Yeah,
once your
sure.
question has been answered, Rohit, you could just lower your hand so that the speaker doesn't get confused.
Okay, so my question is, when we are conducting a research, does it have to be that we select a dependent variable and an independent variable? Like, are these variables necessary while conducting a research?
So it's not necessary. If you're in like quantitative research, identifying variables, an independent variable and a dependent variable becomes important, because you are studying cause and effect relationship in the same way in experimental researches as well. You want to study the effect one variable has on another variable. Therefore, in quantitative and experimental researches, identifying these variables becomes important. But in certain qualitative researches, especially in descriptive researches, you can also go ahead wherein you do not explicitly identify two variables. For example, like an example of a qualitative descriptive study could be, exploring the experiences of sexual assault survivors. Herein, if you see in this research question, there isn't essentially two variables, independent and dependent variable. You just through like a qualitative approach, through conducting interviews, focus group discussions, you just want to explore their lived experiences. So do you see that how in this research, because it's a qualitative research and because you want it to be a descriptive research, you don't explicitly identify two variables and establish a cause and effect relationship between them. But in your initial steps, in your initial phases of research, when you are moving from like a topic to a question, identifying variables can become important for you to like even finalize on a research question. For example, as I mentioned, exploring exploring the experiences of sexual assault survivors, right? Say, for example, your research topic was trauma and sexual assault survivors. You wanted to do a research study surrounding that area, but you still don't have a research question. So you can, maybe go in two possible directions. You can either make it like a qualitative study, wherein you say that, adopting a qualitative approach, you want to explore the lived experiences of sexual assault survivors. Herein, there are no two variables independent and dependent. Here, this is more of like a descriptive study wherein you want to explore their experiences, but you can also go in another direction, wherein you can say that I want to study the effect of social stigma on sexual assault survivors. Do you see in this other example, there are two clear variables that you have identified. You have identified your independent variable, which is social stigma, that how social stigma impacts sexual assault survivors. Herein, you have identified your two variables, independent variable and a dependent variable. I know this might sound confusing and people might have questions, but I would want to move ahead. Keep your questions, you can put them in the chat box, and we'll also take questions in the end. So yeah, thinking about variables, thinking about what different aspects you want to study helps you to narrow down from a from a topic to like a structured research question. Yeah. So this other slide sort of gives like a summary of what all has been done till now. It summarizes these steps into like 4 structured steps. Firstly, and this like I'm going to reiterate what we have done because yeah, there might be some confusion. Firstly, you move from a broad interest area to a narrow research topic. For example, if your broad interest area was pandemic, right? You were interested in studying something related to the pandemic. From that broad area of interest, you move to something that's narrow. For example, you wanted to study about the mental health of frontline workers during the pandemic, right? So you narrowed it down from a broad area of interest. You made it studying the mental health of frontline workers, right? And as I've already mentioned, you can do this by doing basic reading. Equip yourself with, like doing reading, what contemporary debates have been, have been going on in that area, do that. And now you move from like a topic to a structured research question. Your research question should be able to answer what, why, how, who. Now, if you want to do a research on studying the mental health of frontline workers during the pandemic, right? So you need to like identify, like who. So you've already identified that mental health workers. You want to study the mental health of frontline workers. So you have identified your population, right? How do you want to do it? You can also identify that. Do you want this to be a qualitative study, a quantitative study, right? So identifying that as well. So this is how you move like from a topic to a question. The example given here is like we've talked about environmental issues. We've, like how if environmental issue is like a broad area of interest, then from there you come to like a narrowed down topic, which is effect of climate change. But that you cannot really do research on that. You need to have like a structured research question. So from there, you move to like a well-formulated question, which could be, you want to study the impact of climate change on ecological anxiety levels of young adults using a mixed method approach. So do you see how we've come from environmental issues to climate change to this well-formulated research question? I hope that is clear. Now you might have a lot of questions, as to like, but how do we do that, right? I'm going to like come to like literature review in the end. So we're going to talk about how do you do academic reading, how do you find articles, and how do you read articles. So we're going to like cover that aspect. Yeah, let me show you an example, hoping that it becomes more clear. Yeah. So this is something that I have prepared. Right, as you can see in this, like, for example, my broad interest area is social and community psychology. I am interested in exploring the impact of social structures and society on individuals and communities. Now it's a broad area of interest, but I need to identify a research topic under that interest area. So I wanted to study the psychological impact of trauma on adult women who are sexual assault survivors using a qualitative approach. So I have identified a research topic and I have made it into like a research question. How have I done that? I have identified two variables. I have identified my independent variable, which in this case is sexual assault and trauma. How trauma impacts the mental health of sexual assault survivors. So sexual assault and trauma becomes my independent variable, and I want to study the impact of it on their mental health. So their mental health becomes dependent variable. So this is an example of, like how you can do that. The process of doing it is obviously it can be a very long process involving a lot of, like hits and misses, because you might want to, change your research topic every now and then, because that's something that, like happens with all of us. But once you like start doing like extensive reading, you will become more and more confident of your research topic and your question. And going ahead, hopefully it becomes more clear. I want to do like another activity. I don't think we have a lot of time, but I think we can take like 3 to 4 minutes. Prerna, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
So we'll divide you into like groups of like 4 to 5 people. And in your groups, you can take 3 to 4 minutes. We want you to discuss about what you have learned till now. So you, in your initial activity, you all mentioned certain interest areas, something that you were passionate to do research in. Now, based on what you've learned till now, like discuss and identify if you're able to narrow down from that broad interest area to some specific research topics and questions. I want you to take like 4 minutes and then come back. If there are any problems that you are facing while practically applying what you've learned, make a note of these questions and we can take them up like in the end. Till then, I'll also go through the questions in chat. Prerna, you'll
Yes, I'm just assigning everybody. 4 to 5 people will be there in every group. You'll all get a notification in a while. And give me a minute and just a moment. And you can go ahead and join these groups. You all must have gotten a notification to join a group. Please Manya, Yukti, do you want to go ahead and join your respective rooms? Yukti, are you here? And Manya?
hello. We don't really have a lot of time. So if you people, I've also gone through your questions in the chat, but I will take those questions at the end only. And I would just want like, if one or two of you could just unmute yourselves and share your experience from this activity. If you found this useful, has it helped you or, it has just made you think of more questions and you have more questions than answers. So yeah. Yeah, unmute yourself and speak.
Namaste, ma'am. Actually, I never heard in research in my life that there exists something called as independent and dependent variable. So that was very
Okay.
new thing for me,
Hmm.
and I never never differentiated between subject and topic.
Hmm.
So this was very new thing for me, which I missed many times like before, because research is
Hmm.
very new for me actually, as I have done taken education through rote learning. So research is, this was something new for me, this differentiation. So thank you for these two things, new things for me.
Yeah, thank you, Rohit. And for anyone who's new to research, I'm going to make sure, ek to like, I'm going to share my email ID at the end. And secondly, I'm going to make sure that in my post session readings, I'm going to include a lot of basic reading materials and resources that you can go back to and read about the basics of research, how to select a topic and all those things, right? So like, don't worry about that. And of course, you can also always mail me and ask as many questions as you have. um, so now when we've already discussed about a research topic, another question is that what next? Where do we go from here? If you've identified that, oh, this is something that I want to do research on, but now what do I do? So the next step is drafting a research proposal. Right now, you'll ask, what is a research proposal and why is it important? So a research proposal is nothing but it is a very specific and structured document which gives a description of your research. So it basically gives you an outline, and for anyone else who's reading your proposal, it gives them an outline as to how you're going to conduct your research. A, what your research topic is. B, what are your aims and objectives? Why do you want to conduct this research? Why do you think it's important to be conducted? Thirdly, how do you plan on doing it? Like, what is your method? What is the sort of like methods that you're going to follow? Like, who your target population is going to be, who your sample is going to be, how much sample are you going to like sort of, like what are you looking at in terms of practical steps, right? Uh, Now your research proposal is going to be different in every different case. So like your research proposal is like, no two research proposals will ever look the same, right? Because if you're doing a research, say for example in your undergraduate, your university, your college is going to expect you to send a certain kind of research proposal. For example, like if they've already given you 6 months to do a research, so they will expect you to like also include in your research proposal a timeline as to like what your timeline looks like. In how many months are you planning to complete your research? On the other hand, if you're doing research in collaboration, maybe with like an organization or a company or any other institution, they might also ask you to include a budget proposal underneath your research proposal, because like they might be looking to like fund you. Whereas on the other hand, if you're doing research with as part of your undergraduate or masters, no one's going to fund you, so no one will ask you for like a budget proposal. So your research proposal basically gives people an idea of how your research is going to look like and how you're going to conduct it. And research proposal is different based on like where you're doing research and what your objective is, aim is. Yeah, we'll talk more about it. Yeah, let's move ahead.
Yeah, hi. I just want to ask you, like, is it important, like, when we are doing school researches, if we repeat the research done by someone? So, for example, if I'm repeating Loftus and Palmer's research, is that important in any way? Or if you want to do research, we should not apply the same research which was done before?
So I read a similar question in the chat also. I'm not aware if that was your question only.
Oh, no, it
But
wasn't. It wasn't.
yeah, you cannot exactly copy paste anyone else's research. That is one basic rule of like plagiarism and like research ethics. Like you cannot entirely, for example, if someone has done a research on, say for example, understanding mental health impact of COVID-19 pandemic on frontline workers, but you have entirely replicated their research. So for example, if they did a research on men from the ages of 20 to 25 from a particular area, say for example New Delhi, men who from this area, from this age, who were frontline workers, like if they've done a research on, say for example, nurses, you've also replicated that. So for example, if you have replicated and copied some research A to Z, then you cannot really claim that research to be your own. But if you have identified a research paper, like if you have identified a research, say for example, someone did like a research, like same example only, someone did like a research to understand the mental health impact of COVID-19 on frontline workers. But they did a research on men from ages of 20 to 25. But you decide to do a research on women frontline workers from ages 20 to 30. Now, in that case, because you have not exactly copied and replicated their research, you have changed the methodology a little bit because you've changed your participants. Your sample isn't the same. Therefore, you can go ahead and, like do that research. But obviously, you have to cite their research and you have to mention that, we looked at this research and, we have like sort of taken inspiration from them. And yeah, in the other case, if you tweak your methodology, your context, or your approach a little bit, then you can go ahead and do that. But if you're exactly A to Z copying and replicating it, then it won't really be published also, because then like the same research has already been done. I hope that was clear. Yeah, moving ahead. If that wasn't clear, we'll come back to it in the end. As you can see on your screen, we're now going to discuss about some specific components of a research proposal. Like, what do you include in your research proposal? Something that should be there in it. Title, background, and rationale, like we'll step by step come to all these things, right? The first is choosing a title. We have already discussed about a research topic. So title is very similar to your research topic, right? So don't like worry about it. But certain things that you should keep in mind, your title, because it's going to be at the head of your like research, should be able to convey in very few words what your research is, what your target population is, how you're going to do it, etc. Like a good title is that, like for example, whenever you like look at research papers, you read titles, right? Before opening a research paper, what is the first thing that you read? You read a title, right? Now, a good title is what in the title itself conveys entirely what the research is. So when someone reads your title, they get a proper idea of what your like research is going to be like, what your paper is going to include. To make this point more clear, I would urge you all to read what's written on the screen. Right? It's a question. It's another small activity. I already said there are going to be a lot of activities. So yeah. Imagine that you're researching about yoga and its impact on teachers' mental health, right? This is a research topic. Now you have to choose, like you have to write a proper title. What can be a suitable title from these four?
The first one.
Yeah, thank you, Trisha. Does anyone want to like unmute and tell why not the others? Someone else. Anyone? Nandini?
Yeah, hi. So the fourth one reads more like a story or like an essay saying that, it's about yoga gurus and it doesn't even adequately convey what the content is. The third one reads more like one of those like
BuzzFeed articles.
yeah, exactly. And the second one is I feel like it's being a little more conclusive in the title itself, why teachers who do yoga have better mental health.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure any like research committee would approve of that title, that sort of approach.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Nandini. So I hope that that point is clear. So, you have a research topic and you have a question also in mind, but you also now need to put that down into like a proper research title of 1 or 2 lines, which exactly conveys the purpose of your research and also gives the reader a proper idea as to what your research is going to be like, right? Because whenever you also look for research articles, the first thing that you read is the title. No one directly opens multiple research papers and reads them. So your title needs to be catchy in a way, but like it catches attention and conveys like what you're like studying, right? Now, moving from that, your research proposal should also include background and rationale. Right now, this area talks about why the research that you're doing, like what's the aim of your research? What's your objective? Why the research that you're doing is important, it's needed, and it's significant, right? So you talk about things like based on the literature that I have, like you talk about things like based on existing literature, there is a research gap. And my research study aims to fill that gap. And through my study, my objective is to study these things because these variables haven't been studied before. And even if these variables have been studied before, they have not been studied before in this context or on this population, So for example, research studies have focused upon the mental health of women, but mental health of men has not been explored. As someone in the Padlet activity also spoke about male mental health, like they wanted to, that was their interest area, right? So you explore that, right? And you put that in your background and rationale that, like this is why I want to do this study, because this hasn't been studied extensively. Or, minority mental health. For example, in America, the connection between race and mental health has been extensively studied. But in India, minority mental health has not been explored a lot. That people, like how people who come from like caste minorities or gender minorities, how their mental health gets impacted, right? So what are some of the research gaps that your research study is looking to sort of fill? Research question is sort of reiterating your research topic in 1 or 2 lines, very similar to your research title only. It can be more extensive than that. For example, if your research title just says that studying mental health of women sexual assault survivors from a qualitative approach. Now, that's your title. Now, when you put down your research question once again, it could be more extensive. That under qualitative approach, we'll be adopting interview method and focus group discussion. So research question. Don't worry if it feels confusing. I'm going to show you an example. And do we want to take a break, Prerna? What do you think? But before that, yeah, let's. This is an example of a draft research proposal. Now, do you see the title, qualitative study to assess the effect of keto diet, right? That becomes your research title. And as I scroll down, this scope of research, this is the background and rationale, that why do we want to study this, right? What literature review has shown us. And this statement of purpose is the research question, that this research aims to see how continuing keto diet for almost for 21 days, like, so this is your research question. On the top is your title, right? And this background scope is the rationale and the background that we just spoke about. don't worry, in the post reading resources, I will also forward this so you can properly go through this. But do you people want to take a break till 7? Okay, so you can go and come back in like 5 minutes. I'm going to leave this here on the screen if anyone wants to sort of go through it. Yeah. Have people started joining back? Till the time other people are joining in, does anyone want to like unmute and sort of share what do you think till now? Like, is there something that's confusing? Is there something that, if there's something that you've completely like not understood and completely missed out on and you're not able to follow it, like follow the session, like let me know, because we have 1 more hour to go. So I don't want anyone to like be lost.
May I ask something? Yeah, so I was wondering that when it comes to terminology, obviously, like language is culturally constructed. So there are different meanings that are assigned to different words. And say, here, if we look at the word females, for example, or even the word overweight, where, there's a lot of politics that is involved in the idea of overweight or like referring to women as females. So what's the sort of, what are the boundaries with this?
So thanks for pointing it out. This was something that I wanted to sort of come to. This research proposal that you see, I think it's a very old research proposal, because now generally, like, and it's sort of like a general overview. If you're planning on doing research, like, just like it's better to not use words like male, female, because these words are very gender essentialist, right? And today, like when we talk about it, like the terms that are more preferred are men and women, and more specifically, if you want to like narrow down, like cis men, trans men, because when we say men and women, it's more trans inclusive also, it's more inclusive. By saying females, you're basically saying that people only who are like biologically like female, that's who we're talking about, so you're sort of making your study a little exclusive, like exclusionary.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Another question, sort of like barreling on from it, if we have time, is that the scope of research obviously has to be completely defined, right? So when I was conducting my dissertations, I used the word cis females for it. I didn't just cis females, but cis females for it. Because if we are trying to accommodate, if we are attempting to accommodate a whole sort of gender spectrum, then that obviously will bring in other variables to it as well. Because, different people who identify with different gender identities will be having different experiences. So is it sort of like acceptable to narrow your study down like this, or should we be attempting to, bring in all these variables as well?
Ideally, like if your study has something very specifically to do with biology, which is why you only want to limit it to like biological females per se. For example, if you're talking about hormonal levels and you're specifying hormonal levels or something like that, then yeah, sure, you can sort of limit that scope in that with respect to that. But if you're talking about women, it's always better to be more inclusive and include like trans women also, because like their experiences as women also matter, and those are also things that we should be looking at. So yeah, for example, in that example of like keto diet, it's why don't you want to include trans women, include them also and see, that, oh, like how is their mental health also getting impacted, right? So yeah. And in that other example where, like I showed you, which was about sexual assault survivors, right? I specifically used the word women, because I don't want to like only limit it to like cis women, like even trans women, are sexual assault survivors. So I wanted to, like make it more inclusive. So yeah, I hope like more and more people like are joining back. I don't know if Prerna is here, but we're going to start Yeah. So we were talking about, can you all see my screen? Yeah, research methodology, right? You were able to see that. We were talking about drafting a research.
Shreya, no, we can see the PDF.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was on the other screen. So we were talking about drafting a research proposal. Until now, we've spoken about how you need to choose like an effective, you need to word your research title properly, then you need to have a research question, and you also need to mention the background, scope, objectives of your research so that anyone who's reading your research proposal is aware of what you're researching and is also convinced as to why your research is important. For example, a lot of times, you might be submitting a proposal to an organization to, maybe like ask them for funds to, like fund your research, or you may be submitting it to your college to allow you to do dissertation. So your background, your scope, your rationale should be convincing enough to convey to other people that why the research that you're doing is well thought of, is important, it's needed, the context of it, like, and yeah. So that's the purpose like of having like a proper background and rationale. Now, another large chunk of your proposal is going to be research methodology, wherein you tell people as to like how you're going to do research. So this like research methodology focuses on the how aspect of it. For example, who your participants are going to be, what your sample size is going to be, what your research design is going to be, what your are there some ethical considerations that you're looking at. For example, in certain experimental designs, you need to lay down your ethical considerations properly. If there is any deception that's involved, or something like that. So all these things need to be properly laid down and mentioned. Moving on. Yeah. So the first thing that you need to like specifically mention is who your target population is going to be. For example, like undergraduate students in Delhi. What are some tools that you're going to be using? For example, if you're doing a qualitative research, you could be using interview method. So that becomes a tool that you're using. And for interview method, you have like a proper interview schedule at place. So you also want to put that in your research proposal to tell people that, oh, I'm not just planning to do like interview, but I also have thought of these questions. I have thought of, like how I'm going to conduct my interview. Design of research, right? Like design of research is basically like a plan as to how you're going to do your research. For example, as I mentioned that, if you're going to use like an interview schedule, you mentioned that, oh, we're going to conduct face-to-face interviews with 20 women. So, like you lay it down properly. Or for example, a lot of research was being done, like during the pandemic, wherein face-to-face interaction was limited. So therein, your design of research had to include that we will be conducting interviews, but those interviews will be conducted online. Those interviews will be conducted via Zoom. So, this needs to be like put down in your research proposal. Method of analysis. So for example, if you're doing qualitative research, once you've collected your data, you have to then analyze this data. That's like another, like that's the next step in research. So in your research proposal, you also put down that how do you plan on analyzing this data. For like qualitative research, do you plan on doing content analysis, thematic analysis? You sort of mention that. Or for example, if you plan on doing quantitative research, and if there are certain tools that you're going to be using, certain statistical tools, for example, t-tests or something like that. So you put that down. don't worry if you're not understanding this, because you are going to have sessions on qualitative research and quantitative research and, you know, like what methods of analysis are, all of this, right? You should also ideally put down some anticipated problems and directions for future. Now, what that essentially means is that some problems that you might face while doing your research. So for example, if your research is being conducted during the pandemic, one limitation of your study might be, you know, that because your data collection is happening online, so technology or certain technological glitches or certain things might hamper or hinder with your data collection. So, you know, that is a possible limitation, and you can put that down in your research proposal, right? So I'm going to, can you see my screen?
Yes, the PDF.
Yeah. So this sort of explains what your research methodology should look like. You know, if it's a qualitative research, you put that down first. You mention what your target population is. Make it as specific as possible. You know, if you're looking at women, mention the age group. Mention if it's going to be women from an urban area, if it's going to be, you know, and then narrow it down even further if it's going to be women from Delhi, right? So it gives like a clear idea to like people who reading your research proposal, right? And it also helps you with data collection. Sample size. I saw a question that was there about sample size on the chat. Is that person here? Because I don't want to answer it if they're like not here.
Hi, I'm here. Purvi.
Yeah. So I think you asked something like, how do we decide on, you know, like how much sample size is appropriate, right? A, that depends on your research question. What is this kind of question that you're asking? And B, it depends on your research, on your approach. Under qualitative approach, it automatically becomes difficult to collect a lot of data, because, you know, your method of data collection is going to be like interviews or focus group discussions. So automatically you cannot conduct 1,000 interviews, right? So your sample size becomes limited, and that is acceptable. But if you're doing a quantitative research, wherein, you know, you want to send surveys or questionnaires to your participants, now that's something that can be sent to a lot of people, right? If it's an objective survey, you know, that on a scale of 1 to 10 rate something, and, you know, just 10 questions, that you can send to like 500 people, and then you can analyze that data. So it depends on your research approach that you would follow, that you would even more clear in that. So I hope in this draft proposal, you can see how research methodology is mentioned. Method of data collection, you know, like they've mentioned how they're going to conduct interviews on an online platform. They've talked about thematic analysis, how they'll analyze this data, expected outcomes, anticipated problems, some directions for future also you can mention. However, this again depends on which organization has asked you for it. For example, if you're submitting a research proposal for dissertation, your college might not want you to put in expected outcomes and directions for future. You know, they might want you to just mention a very brief research methodology. So in that case, you might like not talk about directions for future. But directions for future, just to like tell you all, it very simply could mean that, you know, what can come out of your research. So if you're doing this research, how can this research be applied in any way, or some direction that you want to give to like someone who might be looking at your research and they want to replicate it, you know. So anything that you want to mention, you can read like what's written here. Yeah. So how they want the results of this study to help in designing awareness sessions, counseling, and psychoeducative sessions, right? So you're saying that your study, like, and whatever results come out of it, those results should be used to like, create like awareness of some kind or do something, right? So that is directions for future. Yeah, we're gonna come. I hope research methodology is clear. Now we're going to talk about timeline. A timeline basically gives an outline of various stages and corresponding timelines for developing and implementing your research. So you basically like make a basic structured table. Now all research proposals might not require you to add a timeline, but in general, as an independent researcher also, it's always useful and helpful to have a timeline for your own sake as well, right? So that you know that in 6 months, or say for example in 1 year, I need to be finishing my research. So you say that, you assign times, assign like time slots to like different research steps. So you can assign time to like doing literature review. Say for example, you write that 2 months, I'm going to be doing literature review. I'm going to be looking at different research articles, research papers, and like summarizing them, doing that. The next 4 months, I'm going to be collecting data, right? The next 2 months after that, I'm going to be analyzing my data. The last month, I'm actually going to be writing my research. So that is the purpose that timeline serves. Now, lastly, your research proposal should include bibliography or references. I assume that a lot of people here are also really confused about referencing, because in the Google form that I sent, like a lot of people spoke about it, that, they're really confused about it. Generally, when we talk about research proposals and research papers also, at the end of your research, you have like a list of references. References are nothing but you are basically mentioning the literature that you have used or cited in your research. The same for your research proposal also. If you've done some literature review, or when you were writing your background, scope, etc., therein you mentioned some research. So now at the end of it, you need to like put in references. You need to like cite them, because I think you're going to have a session on ethics wherein you will talk about plagiarism, right? So you cannot like use anyone else's research, their work, and not like cite it. Now, citation and like referencing is of two types. Now, at the end, though, you have like a list of references. That's something that's there, right? Which looks something like this. If you can see this slide, APA reference. Can you see it? The one that's mentioned in 3 lines. Now, all of this, even though there are various formats, but in psychology, generally, we use APA. And I have also attached in this presentation only link to the APA 7th edition manual. I will also put it in the post reading materials. You should ideally go back to it, read how do you like reference. Yeah. So at the end of like your research proposal, at the end of your research paper, this is how you should be putting your references, wherein you mention the last names of the authors, the year of when the research was published, what's the name of the research, and what is the journal in which it was published, right? But there is also something that's called in-text citation, which might be something that a lot of people might be really confused about. In your literature review, you might be summarizing a particular research paper, or you might be taking ideas from a particular research paper. So you don't just need to credit that research paper at the end, but the paragraph where you're actually like paraphrasing their ideas, or you're summarizing their research, even at the end of that paragraph, in brackets, you need to like cite their work. as you can see in the last line here in APA in-text citation. I'm going to show you an example for this because this might be confusing. Yeah. So in this proposal, which I showed you earlier, if you can look at your screen, right? There is a literature review here. I don't think it has in-text citation. But till that time, I would want you to look at this. This is how you reference at the end. And this is an example of how you do in-text citation, right? They spoke about a particular research and they cited that research in the research proposal itself. So you do it at the end also, and then you do it like while writing it as well. Because APA requires two types of citation at the end and in-text citation as well. I hope you can see this. This is an example of in-text citation. Does anyone have any questions about references, citation in particular? Because I don't want to move ahead if you're like not on the same page.
Yes. Ideally, how many citations a paper should be having? Like, is there anything that, you know, more the references, more credible the paper is? Like, few papers have like 30 references.
Yeah, so that's something that's entirely up to you. That's a call that like a researcher can make. That's like entirely up to you. But yeah, definitely if you know, like you read a research paper that has only 1 or 2 references or citations, you know, like even you would feel that, you know, this paper is not very credible because they've not really like used existing research. So definitely like a paper that refer. But at the same time, it also does not mean that, you know, just because a paper has 40 references in the end, it's a very credible paper or it's a very amazing paper, right? So number of citations or references is never really a benchmark or standard in any way. You should have like a decent amount of like references, which shows that you have referred to existing literature. So 10, 11, 15, like, yeah. Right? So we're like done with research proposal. I hope this has been helpful.
Hi, Prerna. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I also just about the references, I wanted to say that it also depends on how much work has been done in our area, Trisha. So if less work has been done, you obviously would have less number of resources, right? That you can cite. So obviously, it also depends on what kind of methodology you've taken and everything. So you don't need to really worry about your credibility being decided by the number of references that you've quoted. That's what I wanted to say. Thanks, Shreya. Sorry, you can go ahead.
Yeah. So now we have reached to like the last section of our presentation, which is literature review. So we have spoken about doing literature review even in the first section, you know, wherein you have to decide. And, you know, like a lot of people looked very confused as to, you know, like how do you narrow down on a research topic? How do you, you know, make a research question out of it? And even in research proposal, you know, like when you're writing your background and scope, you might have to do some literature review there. So literature review becomes very important. Academic reading becomes, you know, very important. So yeah, we're lastly like going to talk about it. I'm going to wrap this up in the next 5 to 10 minutes, but I want you all to like take a minute, and not even a minute, like 30 seconds, go and like based on whatever research question or research topic that you had thought of, try to find like some research article or some research paper and like make a note of like the problems that you face. Like, do you think it's easy? Like what, like I want to know like what are the challenges that you face? Take like 30 seconds, take a minute.
Shreya, could you share the screen again, please? Or could you just repeat the what was there on it?
Yeah, so I just said that based on whatever research topic that you had chosen, go ahead and like try to find a research article or like a research paper. I want you to basically like, note down what are the kind of challenges that you face.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone want to like unmute and share like what are some problems that you face? If not, I will go ahead because we're also running out of time.
Hi, Alicia.
Hi,
This is
yeah.
one of the problems that I face. I don't know if that's really a problem or maybe I'm stuck up on a rigid pattern. But when I'm looking for related researches, for example, if I had put up a topic when you asked us to write some of the interest areas, pre-pandemic and during pandemic stress levels and its impact on productivity level. Of let's assume the youth only, the working youth. So when I'm looking for related researches, I will find researches of only one variable with respect to different areas and not the particular two variables that I am looking for to find the gap, to find the research gap. So will those articles be applicable? Like if I'm finding pandemic stress level and some other variable with it, do I still use it?
Where do you do your where do you look for articles?
Commonly, I go to Scholar, Google Scholar, and one more site of Taylor and Francis.
Yeah. So my idea behind like for this section, like the last section, is going to be that I'm going to sort of like practically show you how to like look for articles, how to like look for like literature pertaining to your research area, etc. Right? So the first place is go to Google Scholar, right? Don't do random Google searches. You're not going to come up with like, you're not going to find like research articles there like in like a proper manner, right? Go to Google Scholar. I hope everyone can see my screen, right? So can anyone just share like something like a research topic, something that you want to find articles on? Yeah.
Hi, can I go ahead?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share the topic that I plan on working on, which was the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the mental health of school students.
Right. Now, the first step is do not ever write a full sentence in like your Google Scholar searches. That is something that a lot of people end up doing, and then you do not get desired results, right? So as I think someone mentioned, COVID-19 pandemic, mental health, school students, always type in keywords from your research topic, your research question. That's the way to go ahead, right? So when like I press search, so who spoke about this?
I did, Amira.
Yeah. So do you see the research articles that have appeared?
Yeah.
Do you find anything that's helpful?
Yeah. So, second one.
Yeah. So like the first tip is to always start with Google Scholar, because you're going to find like a large repository of research articles, journal articles, research papers. Secondly, don't ever type the full sentence. For example, like when they mentioned that impact of mental health on, do away with these filler words, just type in keywords. So the keywords that I typed in were COVID-19 pandemic, mental health, school students. So on the top of the list, I can see like a bunch of articles. Now you would ask that, like there are so many articles. Now, how do we filter through these articles, right? Another step is to always look at the citations. Can you see the citations? Cited by 56, cited by 6. This sort of helps you establish credibility of that research paper. Any research that has been cited by a lot of sources is automatically like credible. For example, this research, if it has been cited by like more than like 200 sources, right? Then, like it gives you an impression that, oh, this might be like can be like helpful. Another way, like even if you find like a research paper that's related to your research topic, but it's not very like cited, you can still go ahead, you can open it, right? One way to like filter out and know whether or not like it's good enough and if it's pertaining to your research topic or not is to read the abstract, right? Because a lot of research papers and literature that you might find will not be open access, like you won't really be able to like access them, but you can always access the abstract. So the first step, read the abstract, right? Like if I open it, I don't know if I'll be able to open it. So that, right, you can always read the abstract, and then you can establish whether or not it talks about like the variables that you are looking at studying, if this research is of any help or no, or not. Okay. And if you find one research paper that you think is amazing, and you can, definitely like cite it, you can use it for literature review, but you're not able to find more research papers like it, always look at this thing, related articles. This is going to give you a list of researches of research papers that are related to this particular research paper that you found helpful. So always look at related articles. Another way is when you like see a research paper, see its reference list. See what research articles and papers that paper has referred to. And then you can try and like opening and like accessing those research papers. That way, it will help you find literature, it will help you find research articles that are pertaining to your particular like research topic. Who was that person who spoke about how they cannot find like research articles related to their variables? There was someone.
It was me.
Yeah. Do you want to like yeah.
So like, should I repeat my
Yeah.
doubt? So previously,
like what was your topic? I'll try to see if we can like find it.
So my topic is also like sentenced very vaguely. So probably that's why I'm not able to. But like my idea of the research was to find out like before pandemic, the stress level of people, and during pandemic, the stress level of people, how that has impacted their productivity levels.
Now, another reason why your research might be a little complicated is because you're trying to compare like a bunch of variables. It's not just like two broad variables. So you're also trying to compare stress levels pre-pandemic, stress levels post-pandemic, and productivity levels pre-pandemic, productivity levels post-pandemic. So that's why finding a research study that has exactly looked at all these variables is again automatically going to be hard. But maybe like so There are some studies which have talked about parental stress. But you might want to maybe. So there is some research on cognitive functioning.
Okay.
Right, so you can definitely look.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you see my screen? Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, we've already spoken about it. Like if you do not find appropriate research articles on even Google Scholar and like you're struggling, there are some other sources that you can definitely look at. Sources specifically that are related to psychology are APA PsycNet. I'm not sure how many people know it. But yeah, that's one source that you can definitely also look for articles at. Apart from it, someone spoke about Taylor and Francis. I think, yeah, sure, the JSTOR is great. ResearchGate has open access articles, so it's going to help you. But always, as like the first step, and as a beginner, you can always start with like Google Scholar. And I've already shown you like a bunch of like tips and tricks that you can follow. Keywords, looking at citations, looking at related articles, looking at reading the abstract to finding to conclude if whether or not it's related, looking at the reference list of that research paper. Right? But another problem that people generally face is that even when you found like a proper research paper, but you're not able to access it, right? You can only see the abstract, and like a lot of journals are paid. Like even APA PsycNet is paid. Your I guess Taylor and Francis is open access. I'm not sure. But like JSTOR, etc. Right? Most of these journals are paid. Now, students who are from like universities, for example, if someone's from Ashoka, Christ, etc., universities do give you institutional access. Like they will give you like a mail ID, which will allow you to access a lot of these research papers and articles. But if you're not like from a university, what do you do? One way is you can type the name of your research paper, like the title, with .pdf on Google. And if there are any PDFs available, if any journals, open access journals have put them up, you will find them. Or you can also visit Reddit Scholar. That's something that I discovered like recently. It's a place where people with institutional access, like if someone has university access, they share paper with others. And one last way that you can always sort of like last resort of sorts is emailing authors. Like, for example, if there is a research paper and you cannot find like access to it anywhere, see like who this author is, try finding their email on LinkedIn or something and try emailing them that, oh, this research paper, I'm really interested in it. Can you like send it to me? Authors, I'm not kidding, more than like mostly are willing to share their research paper. So that is something that you can do. Now there are also resources like LibGen, Sci-Hub, which give you access to books and research papers, but whether or not they should be used is highly debated because, yeah, but it's something that you should be aware of. Sci-Hub, LibGen, you can always make a note of that. We have reached like the end of the presentation. These are just some tips of, okay, I am rushing ahead. Yeah. So whenever, like you're feeling stuck, whenever you might be feeling stuck, like you might feel that, you're not able to like read, or you're just getting bored, you're not able to engage with articles, There are like some small tips and tricks that you can follow. You can like for some papers you can just look at the abstract, or you can just try to like skim through the research paper. Another way through which you can stay engaged is by like making notes. Like I know it's really hard, but you can like try doing that. Yeah, you can like read this slide later. Lastly, I just want to talk to you about writing the review. Like you found multiple research papers and now you have to write your literature review. How do you do that? One basic understanding that we have of literature review is that literature review is just a summary of various researches, which is not the case, right? It's you don't just have to summarize someone else's research. You also have to look at their research. You have to read that research, and you have to see how that research is linked or can be linked with your research topic, right? If for example a particular research paper has talked about stress, has talked about stress levels, so the findings of that research, you can use that to link it with your research topic, which is not exactly the same, right? Like for example, as I think Alicia was mentioning, that if you want to study about stress levels during the pandemic, you can link the findings of some research paper which might not have even talked about the pandemic, but try to link their findings to your particular research topic, right? So writing a literature review is not just summarizing multiple research papers. It actually means that you try to sort of present their research in such a way that the arguments can be used to supplement your research topic, and you also try to identify research gaps. You mention multiple researchers, you mention what they have done, and like you say that, oh, these like this research article has looked at this variable, but this variable is something that they've not looked at, and this is where your research study comes in. Or you can tie in multiple research papers together and try to draw like one argument, one general argument, wherein like in the end you can be like, all these research papers have made this similar conclusion or this similar argument. So this is how a literature review is different from just like summarizing ki, oh, they did this was their sample, this was their findings, and yeah, your literature review is done. I'm going to show you an example, after which I am done. Like this, we've reached like the end of the session. You can start putting your questions in the chat box, if any. I hope you can see the screen, the Word document.
Yes.
Yeah, so you can read this, right? I was actually like reviewing research papers wherein I wanted to understand the relationship between sexual assault and how it impacts the survivors' health and well-being, right? Now I have spoken about this particular research paper in just 4 lines. I have not focused on unnecessary details. I have just focused on one aspect of this paper that was pertinent to my own research. Like my research was about studying the impact of sexual assault on survivors' mental health. And this particular research paper spoke about self-concept among sexual assault survivors. So I just spoke about this aspect of the research paper. I have not written, if they used 100 participants, they used quantitative method, right? Because I want to make this argument. Therefore, this is like how I have, spoken about this particular research paper, right? And going ahead, it's not just a plain summary of different papers. I have tried to like pick specific aspects from those research papers. Like the earlier research paper spoke about self-concept, and self-concept is a part of psychological overall well-being, right? So I highlighted that. This research paper spoke about trauma and how, it's associated with stigma in society, right? So I've highlighted that. With this, I think we come to the end of the presentation. I have also exceeded like my time so much, but this is what we have done. We've gone from research topic to drafting a research proposal to doing a literature review. The reason why this session is also important, because as in the first session, someone spoke about a mandatory assignment, and your mandatory assignment is going to be about drafting a research proposal of your own. So I hope this was helpful. I'm going to be taking questions, but we have to stop like whenever Prerna asks us to stop. But I'm pretty sure questions never end. And if you, do have questions, or, in the future, if you're doing like research and, you're stuck somewhere, you can always feel free to like mail me here. Like this is my mail ID. I'll also be like forwarding this presentation to you. So you like don't have to like worry about like copying it down or anything. And yeah, like people who have raised hands can like start. I'll also look at the chat simultaneously.
Ma'am, I had two questions. So literature review is basically you just refer to various research papers, and then you try to pick specific questions, which specific points which is related to your research area. That's what you write in the literature review when you do it in the paper.
Yeah, that's one aspect of it, something that's pertinent to your research topic. But you can also mention things like if you want to highlight a research gap, if you want to highlight that, they studied these variables in this context, but this was something that, they have not studied. For example, this research was done only on men, and, like they didn't include women in their participants. So you mention that, and, like then you mention that research gap. So that also becomes important. So basically, the idea is not just like plainly just summarizing the entire thing, but being strategic about it. Like what components do you keep, like what, but at the same time, like you also have to convey what the study was. Like you can't just put like one line and expect people to like understand it. Yeah, Meghna.
Ma'am, I still have one more question. So, ma'am, well, when we actually start, looking at our research, and when we start deciding our topic and stuff, so which is the right time you should actually refer to research papers, like because you have to write the literature review too. So, is it before you actually come down to your specific research topic, or can it be after your research topic when you have formed, and then you like refer, and then you write the literature review, and then you move on to different paragraphs and stuff? When is the right time, or it depends?
So literature review, so you have to write, like whenever you're drafting your research proposal, or you actually like are like starting research, that is when, like you start doing a literature review. But there is no right or wrong time for reading research articles, for reading research papers. Like initially we talked about how to select a research topic. Like some of you might have like broad interest areas, as I mentioned, but you don't know how to narrow down on a research topic, how to identify like what are certain variables you can study. So even in that process, reading some literature, reading some research papers is going to come in handy. Like, if you want to do a study on COVID-19, but you don't know, like, what specific areas do you want to look at? What are some variables? What population? So, you just go to Google Scholar, type in COVID-19 pandemic. You're going to get a list of like multiple research studies that have been done pertaining to like COVID-19. That will help you sort of, understand what is the research trend, what are some contemporary debates that are happening, right? Which might help you to identify certain like research topics and questions. You might see and like a research that was done in America, and you might feel, oh, this is interesting. The same research can be done in the Indian context also. So this is how reading literature will help you identify a research done, like finalized your research question. then you have to do a literature review, obviously, to like write in your research paper. Yeah.
Thank you.
Meghna, I hope I'm, yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't have to like call me ma'am, please, like I said, you can say Shreya.
Yeah, so I had a question. So one of the times when I'm trying to write a research question, so if you're trying to study a topic which hasn't been dealt with for a while, and if you can't find a lot of studies for it, so I remember my professors telling us that you need to find a prevalence study itself, and only then you can move ahead with that topic. So is that really important? Like, what do you do when you don't find a prevalence study? Like, for example, if it's a topic like death anxiety, if you can't find a prevalence study for it, can we really, is there another way forward for this?
So there will always be certain topics, that will be new in a sense, and there you won't be a lot of prevalent research on those topics. But I don't think that should hinder anyone in any sense or stop them from like doing research on that topic. Even if you don't find like research particularly on that like topic, there will be something related to it. For example, I think you spoke about death anxiety. If that's something that you like, you just cannot find, but you can find like research articles on anxiety in general, and you can find research articles on for example, the Freudian concept of life instinct, death instinct, right? Research that has been done on those areas. So that's not exactly related to your research topic or your research question, but it's somewhat related to it. So reading those research articles like is really like going to sort of like enhance your understanding and your knowledge related to that subject, and in what way has research been done in that area. But like you can definitely go ahead and like do a research study on a completely new topic, like that's like entirely fine. Yeah, but try to read and look for research articles related to that like area, which I'm sure like you will find. Ananya, then Rohit. Yeah, Meghna.
I had a question in the chat box, which I had put in like a little bit time before.
What is it?
So I wanted to know how you can integrate like two different areas. So if you're looking at, I just gave an example that if you're looking for negative stereotypes and you want to learn more about it in a particular population, and if you want to bring in a clinical variable into it.
For example?
Maybe anxiety or like development of resilience in that population. If you want to look at the resilience or how that kind of integrates.
So if you feel that, there are multiple variables that you're looking at, which cannot be sort of understood or studied in like one way, so you can definitely look at those variables using different methods and different tools. For example, if you want to study negative stereotypes on society and, like how it impacts anxiety levels, like, maybe you could do like a mixed method research wherein, like you conduct interview, like a mix of qualitative and quantitative, and you're going to have a session on mixed method also and quant and qualitative, wherein you can conduct an interview to explore what kind of negative stereotypes and perceptions exist in society and how they impact mental health, and to specifically research or study about anxiety. You can do that quantitatively by sending people like questionnaires, like an anxiety measuring questionnaire, like a self-evaluative scale, through which you can at the same time qualitatively you can gauge and explore what kind of negative stereotypes exist and how they impact anxiety. But at the same time, you'll also quantitatively get like scores and like proper statistical values as to till what extent do we see like. So mixed method approaches are definitely like one way to go about that, where there are like multiple variables, because if you want to study anxiety and if you feel ki sirf interview say you won't really be able to like gauge the level of anxiety and extent of it, definitely like you can introduce like a survey questionnaire, something like that. Yeah. Ananya?
I'm really sorry. So at the level of finding the topic, how do you go about it? because you won't find a lot of research about that same topic, right? So how do you do that?
Is this pertaining to like your death anxiety or your second example of like?
Second example.
For this example, like I'm pretty sure you're going to find like you will find research on like, which links stereotypes that exist in society with anxiety levels. You might not find research exactly pertaining to which to the exact population that you're looking at studying, because I don't know that might be a little difficult, but you will definitely find studies like relating to that. Even if you don't find something relating to anxiety, impact of negative stereotypes on mental health in general, something you will definitely find. It's a common topic. Yeah, thank you. Anyone can go. You have like 5 more minutes.
Can I go ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's about the review of literature. So apart from mentioning facts and study findings from other research papers, can we include our understanding and our perspective of the topic in our review of literature?
No, that's something that will go in introduction. Okay. So a research paper also has like an introduction section, wherein I think someone also asked this question, if we can, I think Sukriti, if we can quote like news articles and like media articles, that's something that you can mention in your introduction. But literature review, as the name suggests, is review of literature. So review of literature is basically you suggesting and you putting down evidence. Right? And evidence has to be scientific in nature. So you can only put down research studies and research papers. But in the introduction, where you're giving a general introduction of what your topic is, etc., you can put down, you can cite some articles, you can put down your understanding to an extent. But one key difference is that a research paper is not like an opinion essay. So, it has to be as formal, scientific, objective in nature as possible. Yeah, Rohit?
My question is that it is regarding research only in the context of historical research. My question is, so what if like I am researching on any XYZ king, and if I find many contradictions in about his behavior in many literatures, then how should I deal with this thing? Like if I find contradiction, like one literature says that he was a good king, another literature says that he was not a good king, but like in same literature, if I find both positive and negative, that might create a chaos in my own analysis, and in the end in my own conclusion about that XYZ king's behavior. So how such chaotic things should be dealt in a very systematic way for a proper conclusion?
So one thing, like as I already mentioned, like research articles, like research papers are not like opinion essays. So you cannot put down anything in a research paper unless you're backing it up with data, with evidence, with like data that you've collected and analyzed, right? So the chances that you're going to find these opposite like contradictions are going to be very less. For example, if one research paper says that we've collected data and we have seen that high stress levels are linked to anxiety, you will hardly find like another research paper which is going to be like, no, stress and anxiety are not connected. Because if they're doing that, then they have to like cite evidence, they have to collect data and prove it, right? So but in the odd chance that you come across different research papers wherein you find contradictions, you look at their evidence, you look at what was the difference in evidence. What did one research paper look at one population? Did they, not look at the other population? And in your literature review, you can mention this contradiction. You can mention that, this research paper spoke about it, but another research paper, they did their research on this population, and you can mention that, there were some contradictions that I found, etc. Like that can be like highlighted. It should not like put you like back in any way. I see a question from Lipika. You've also raised your hand. Is this the question? If it is a quantitative approach and the target population is not easily accessible, then you might also sort of try to like look at what your target population is. Like, if it's not easily accessible, do you still want to continue like doing your research study on that population? Because, like if you feel that you're not going to get like desired data, then, it might affect your research study in some way. Can you like talk more about it? Because accessible in what way? Like, do you have an example?
For example, if it is schizophrenia patients and I want to do a study, those are my target population, but I don't have a lot of I don't have access to a lot of patients with schizophrenia or mood disorder or any other. So
then yeah, sure. In certain cases where, the target population that you're looking at is not like something that is like readily like accessible. For example, if you want to do a research on people who were COVID positive, right? There might not be a lot of people who want to like openly come out and admit that they were COVID positive, right? So then that like population might not be easily accessible, right? This was a random example, like that might not be the case. So in that case, like if you can justify that the reason why my sample size was this, because this is like the only like number I could access, then yeah, that's fine. So even in quantitative, you can like approach like less people, or like sample size can be small. If your research population was something that is not like accessible. Ananya, what do you mean by how can we explain our research context properly?
Okay, so you talked about finding a context while framing a research question and while, like framing a research proposal. So what did you mean by finding a context specifically?
Finding a context basically means like giving background to your research.
Okay.
Like, like in what context is your research being done? For example, if you're doing a research, like your research topic is related to stress levels and pandemic. So pandemic becomes your context, right? You mentioned that, the second wave of pandemic was, during these months, and, like, so that becomes background and context to your research. That, it is in this context that we're doing like this research, right? Like there was second wave, and it was observed that, like stress, there was an increase in stress levels because of, XYZ reasons, whatever variables that you've identified. So, that becomes like a context, so to say.
So I can explain it in my research question only, right?
Like your research question can mention that your second wave COVID-19 pandemic, would you like not explain it?
Okay.
Because the research question is 1 or 2 lines.
Yeah, okay.
So it's already 8:05, and I see that there are more questions. Prerna, do you think that we should end the meeting and people can like mail questions, or people can like start leaving, and if there is someone who wants to stay back, they can do that? Because I can like,
I'm
okay with either.
If anybody has any questions, they can mail it to Shreya. Her mail ID is given in front of you, or you can send in your mails at Discover mail ID, and then we can forward the questions to Shreya. Otherwise, I hope are there any questions? Obviously it has been a nice information heavy session. So obviously there are going to be afterthoughts as well. So maybe everybody can take some time to figure out what their questions are. Also, Shreya, do you want to talk a bit about the assignment that we're going to send? Just a brief, so that they are aware that there is an assignment that's coming their way.
Yeah, so after this session, you're all going to receive information via mail and via WhatsApp, via your WhatsApp group about your first mandatory assignment, which was something that was already mentioned in the first session on Monday, I think. Yeah, so under your mandatory assignment, you've all been divided into 6 groups of 5 people each. You can all go ahead and make your WhatsApp groups on Signal, Telegram, whatever. We essentially want you all to like get together and come up with like a broad research topic, like a research area, like based on today's session. You can have a discussion there for, like as much as you want. Come up with like a common research area, a common research topic based on your discussions. And after which, like after your discussion, after you've come to like, after you've reached one topic, we all want you to individually prepare research proposals. We all want you to individually prepare your own research proposals on any like research question that should be related to the research topic that you've all collectively decided in your group. But you can have like different research questions. For example, if one research topic, say for example, that has been decided is COVID-19 pandemic and stress, right? This is a broad research topic. Now everyone can take this research topic and make your own research proposals. Now your research questions can be different. Someone might want to study COVID-19 and stress in a specific population. Someone might want to study it in women. Someone might want to study it in frontline workers. Someone might want to do it through a qualitative approach. Someone might want to do it through a quantitative approach. So take a common research topic, but make your individual research proposals, and you have time till, I guess, 26th September. And if you have any questions regarding that, you can bring them up in like further sessions, and you can mail, of course, like you can mail on the Discover ID. You can ask on your WhatsApp group. Now, I would prefer if you people like the questions that you have, you can either, as Prerna already mentioned, mail it on the Discover mail ID, or even mail me personally. I'm okay with either.
All right. So thank you so much, Shreya, for such a wonderful session. And I hope everybody took, learned something new, is taking back something that they did not know before. And if you knew before, some of your knowledge was replenished and everything. So that's about it. I'll also stop the recording. Everybody's Lipika said thank you to you.